what we're doing is looking at how we can enhance those systems going forward. And what John's talking about is that design of the systems that's taken place to improve it going forward.
I'll only interrupt once more on because we've got to go to Senator O'Brien. In the standardisation of fatigue management, etc., and flying safely as a result of that, in the consideration of that, do you, as well as the skill of the pilot in line, understanding the plane and how it works, do you take into serious consideration the physical capability of the pilot? I mean, some pilots, like me, I think I'm due for a bypass checkup. I'm getting old and rugged. But do you consider whether that bloke could run up that flight of stairs? I mean, there was an issue here with security some years ago, but not talk about now, where I used to think, well, if I was causing trouble here, all I'd do is run up those stairs and he wouldn't be able to come up after me because he's unfit. Do you have a minimum requirement? Do you check cholesterol? Do you check the fatigue that comes from prostatitis and all those sort of things?
I get Peter to comment on that, Pete.
Yes, they have standard medicals that they have to do. Those medical requirements change with age, so obviously, without going into the detail of each particular medical, but basically the older you get, the more stringent and the broader and the more frequent those checks become for that very reason that you're addressing.
Senator Xenophon.
I don't understand, if the Qantas group has consistent standards, why would there be a different fatigue risk management system for Jetstar compared to Qantas? I don't understand that, and it seems that whatever fatigue risk management system is in place now, there's a new one being developed. Is that a fair summary?
The group standard will be the same right across the group. There is already a policy and the standard will be set, outcome-based wherever possible and prescriptive where required.
But the implementation could be different for each airline.
Well, if the implementation needs to be different in order to meet the needs of the specific operation, meeting the same standard, the same outcome, that may well be the case.
But it's the same as when we talked about pilot training and pilot recruitment. Different airlines within the group have different processes and procedures in place for them because the operations for the different parts of the organisation is different. They operate different aircraft and different route structures and different networks. So we've always regarded it as appropriate. And I remember there are accountable managers for each of the AOCs that have the accountability to look at their systems and processes and make sure that they're right for those organisations and taking the experience of the Qantas group and applying it. So it's a big advantage for each of the AOCs, but it's there because each of the operations are different.
I'll leave it there for now. I might ask at the end, Chair.
Yeah, thanks. I was wanting to ask some questions about cabin crew in Jetstar and perhaps, if we have time, some questions about stick shaker events to Captain Davey. In terms of Jetstar cabin crew, we're given to understand that some individual shifts can run as long as 15 hours, and that's permitted under the contract of employment of particular employees. Is that right?
Yeah, I think at the last hearing I said that I think that the roster limitations are 12 hours for a lot of them. Obviously, people flying long haul international that will have extensions, but there's we'll have longer duties, but there's rests on those aircraft, and there is the possibility for the short haul ones to also extend to 15 hours based on disruption. So you will get situations in the airline where weather patterns or whatever can occur. And the nature of aviation is you will have extensions of duty. But I just come back to the average hours worked. I mean that they're the anomalies that tend to get a bit of focus. But the average hours worked for a cabin crew member across our business is 27 hours a week.
Sure. I guess if we're looking at the issue of fatigue, and it's suggested that shifts can be as long as 15 hours. What I would like to know is how frequently would an employee encounter such a shift? If it occurred, would that mean that they would automatically be rostered off for a set period? How does that work?
Yeah, there's rest periods that occur once a duty time limit like that has been extended, and they're extended rest periods. So we're happy to provide you with that information.
Yeah,
but
sure.
It'd be a fairly rare...
That would be helpful to understand, because if there's a delay in the system or a weather problem and there's no crew available, or, for example, if, as I'm also told occurs, cabin crew arrive at a place which should be the end of their shift but find that there's a staffing problem and they're asked to effectively perform another shift. That would be also where this extended shift arrangement would occur. And I'd be keen to know what guarantees the staff have of extended rest periods and limitations of those imposition. So if you can help us either now or on notice, that would be good.
I think maybe to talk in broad terms about that, I mean, the last few months in particular, and as you can imagine in aviation, disruption has been quite amazing given Christchurch, Japan, the Queensland flood, Cyclone Yassi, the volcanoes in Bali, and a series of other events that have caused us a lot of disruption across our network. So you do get a lot of crew out of base, but what ends up happening actually is we've had to cancel a lot of flying because we've had crew out of hours on rest periods, we've had crew in the wrong base, we've tried to move crew out of certain ports like Alan was talking about on Tokyo, and therefore we've had to cancel a series of flights because of those events. But rest periods are definitely adhered to when duties are extended. And I can give you some backup on that. But I'd just say that they're it's easy to focus on the anomaly, and in any industry, in any work, when it comes to you can imagine a finance person when it comes to budget time, or there's always periods of time where anomalies occur and people do work longer hours. Yeah. But the average hours, I think, is the best sign of the average amount of work that people are doing.
Well, I'd be happy if you can supply us the additional information I requested on notice. I'd appreciate that. Another issue that's been raised with us is the incidence of fatigue staff who arrive at home base and then need to transport themselves home in a fatigue state. I'm reminded of circumstances where a doctor working an extended shift, a doctor in training working an extended shift in a country hospital then attempted to drive home and was killed in an accident. Now, the issue that's been raised is, of course, some studies suggest that at a certain stage of fatigue, you're likely to be affected worse than if you were driving under the influence of alcohol. Is that something that's been considered in your assessment of duty hours and the welfare of crew?
Yeah, we provide, I mean, it comes back to this dual responsibility as well. If a crew member feels they're fatigued, then they'd speak to their line manager and we'll provide them transport home. A recent example, for instance, in what we've been doing in southeast Queensland, where we have people working both Gold Coast and Brisbane, and sometimes the drive times can be longer, is we've put a formal process in place where people can ask for accommodation if they're working 2 shifts out of one base, or if they arrive late, or it's the sort of things that we're all the time trying to improve upon. But often if you can imagine a cyclone or a flood, you get a lot of events that occur that you can never really foresee, and therefore it's really important that the individual takes a dual accountability of that or dual responsibility for fatigue.
Sure. Is there a process where your line managers are kept up to date on opportunities for crew to take advantage of those things? How does it work?
Yeah, the line managers are involved in both all the safety and improvement actions. So if there's safety reports or there's other feedback coming in, they'll be involved in that. And the line managers are also involved as a first point of call if a crew member is fatigued, or if a crew member does want take some time off, or whatever the particular story would be, they would be involved in that.
I mean, there must be circumstances where there's, you need someone to work extra time, and there's a view of the employee that they don't feel they're up to it, and them not feeling up to it means you're going to have to cancel a flight because you haven't got anyone else. What instruction do you give your line managers about that sort of conflict? Because clearly that's where a conflict's going to occur. If someone's pleading for staff to do a job and the staff member's sort of saying, well, I really don't feel up to it.
Yeah, I think you do get difficult situations, and the recent events highlight that, where you're trying to get customers out of a particular port.
Sure.
I mean, we had recent incidents where we're trying to get aircraft out of...
You don't have to tell me about all the difficulties of being delayed, and I've experienced most of them in my time. And I've been told a lot of stories too about difficulties in getting crews for particular aircraft when time limits have expired. So I understand that, but sorry for interrupting. I just thought I should put that on the record.
But I think it is a thing across the group. From everybody's point of view, we say nothing is more important than safety. We make that very clear. We've had road shows that we've gone around to every employee in Qantas, Link, Jetstar, and we said you have to put safety first. So if somebody says that they're tired, they're not able to operate a sector, that is a clear message throughout the organisation. You accept that and the operation doesn't occur, because we're not going to have a flight that goes with people operating inappropriately. And if there was ever an example of a manager that put somebody under pressure to fly those sectors, we would come down on that, because that is not us taking safety as the top priority, and that's the mantra across the entire organisation.
Can you tell me what a tag flight is?
Yeah, tag flight is a flight that extends often from an international service. So an aircraft may arrive, for instance, into Gold Coast or Cairns or Darwin, and then will continue on that international flight into another port. That's often what's referred to as a tag flight. So
is it a domestic leg as well as an international leg at the same time?
It can be, technically can be flown as an international or domestic leg, but it's as far as what we're trying to do from a customer perspective is it's a through flight that stops in a port is the best way to think about it. Has a stopover. Yeah.
Right. It's a flight presumably where you've got an aircraft crewed from an international destination, comes into, say, Darwin, and then presumably if you're going to continue as a domestic flight, everyone would go through immigration's customs in Darwin and then would check in for the next leg, and that's the tag leg, is it?
Yeah, sometimes they'll clear immigrations and customs. Sometimes they'll go straight through. Depends on the aircraft patterning. Depends on the other end. But effectively, the customers are going through. So Singapore to Melbourne or Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh through to Sydney. They're classic examples of those sectors.
Now, I understand you've engaged cabin staff in both Singapore and Bangkok.
That's correct.
And they fly some of those legs, including the tag legs.
They fly only the international tag legs. The crew will fly, and they may be operated as domestic services, but as international flights.
Yeah. But I could book onto one of those flights in Darwin, for example, get onto a particular tag flight to travel to Brisbane or Sydney or Melbourne, wherever it was going.
Like you could also in Sydney go to Melbourne and. On a variety of different services. Yeah.
So presumably that crew would have had to, for me to get onto the plane, I wouldn't have to go through customs at the other end. So the other passengers would have had to have gone through customs in Darwin.
That's correct.
And that'd be the same for the crew?
Yeah, it depends on the terminals they operate out of. You would have seen, for instance, in some of the, like in Sydney, for instance, if you operate out of the international terminal, your domestic passenger, they give you a special sticker to...
I haven't done that, so I've not had one of those stickers, but yeah. Okay.
So there's a variety of different terminals and different immigration requirements, and we try and best meet the airport and government immigration requirements at the particular ports.
Okay. So those crew would continue. What length of flight are we talking about, say, from Ho Chi Minh City extending into a tag flight in Australia?
Will it be 4 hours, 4 to 4.5 hours out of Saigon to Darwin, it might be another 4.5, 4 to 5